You there?
I am.
Oh, there's your little thumbnail. I have a large square that says Zoom. There we go.
What was the ticking?
I'm next to the grandfather clock.
Ah,
Time is wasting. Tick, tick. How's life at your house?
quiet.
Somebody seeping already?
Yes.
Wow.
All right. We are live on YouTube. We are ready to go. We have 4 of us thus far, but it is time to begin. So we will start with prayer. Dear Lord, be with us tonight. Help us, Lord, as we turn to your word. Give us the insight and understanding that only you can give. Send your Holy Spirit to work in our hearts to make us receptive to your truth. All this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. We didn't meet last week because I was up in Minnesota. So we are picking up where we left off 2 weeks ago, which is in Matthew 6, chapter 6, verse 16. And we are in the middle of the Beatitudes and the Beatitudes, Sermon on the Mount. Sorry, Beatitudes begin the Sermon on the Mount. But I want to talk a little bit about perspective, how we view things, the lens through which we look. And the bulk of this section that we're in right now in the Sermon on the Mount is talking about perspective. And I want to start off talking about perspective in a way that does not, it is not here in the text specifically, but it is another application of perspective. Today is a day of mighty hand wringing and waiting, and everybody worried and stressed about election stuff. And I'm going to share with you what I shared with someone else. You've probably heard me say it again, but it's a good time to, you probably heard me say it before, but it is a good time to mention it again. Our perspective as believers is different. And the more in tune we are with our God and who he is and what he's doing, what his plan is, what his plan has always been, the way he has always worked, then that should enlighten the way we look at this world. And so I will throw out this statement, which may sound, I don't know what it'll sound like, but I think it makes, I know it makes sense. Paul never spent a single minute worrying about who was emperor. He didn't write about it. He didn't reference it. He didn't wring his hands. It didn't matter. It didn't matter because Paul knew this world is not my home. Paul, who talks in Ephesians 6 about our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and principalities in the heavenly realms, the spiritual forces in the heavenly realms. That's cosmological terminology. And that doesn't mean that to what degree we can do things to improve our world here, that we shouldn't do that. But I do think it's important to understand that the rulers of this world are not the people you see in suits and ties or pantsuits or whatever. They're not. They're not. The rulers of this world are the dark lords, just as it was in Egypt, just as it was all over the place, and still is today. And they call the shots. So just perspective. And especially as we see this world spinning down And as we see and remember, evil and darkness, same thing. Darkness has no substance. Darkness is a lack of something else. It is a lack, a privation of the light. It's when it is lacking. And as the light of the gospel has decreased in this world, and the proclamation of that truth has decreased in the world, the darkness advances. The light burns down, and the darkness advances, and the creepy, crawly, scary things that are there advance. We need to understand it for what it is. And as long as we are in the light, we're all right. We're all right. That is our perspective. That is the way we need to look at things. Jesus is in control. In the book of Revelation, all the things that happen, those 4 sets of 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, on and on. It makes it very clear God is in charge of all of that. He's the one in charge. He's not responsible for the evil, but the fact that his angels are the ones who are pouring out the bowls, sounding the trumpets, etc., opening the seals, makes it clear he is the one who is in control. So on this day after the election day, I thought it appropriate to talk about that, since we are talking about perspective here in the Sermon on the Mount. And so again, the Sermon on the Mount is about, if you were to give it one theme, it is telling us how the believer, that's us, walks in the righteousness that Christ has given us. It's not my righteousness, it's his righteousness. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. That's how it works, okay? In the Sermon on the Mount, he's teaching his children, his followers, the believers to whom he imputes his righteousness, how we live in that righteousness. And as it starts off with the Beatitudes, it's completely different than the way it appears. Nothing in this world is as it seems. That's the start of the Sermon on the Mount. Nothing in this world is as it seems. The things that matter in this world do not matter in relation to the eternal. They do not matter as regards our mission. So our question needs to be, or better, for this section that we're in, a directive that we receive is what you do unto the Lord. What you do, how you live, how you spend, how you work, how you raise your kids, how you be there for the other people in your life. What you do unto the Lord. Because if you're not doing it unto the Lord, you're going to go off track. You're going to go askew. And you're going to wonder why you're doing these good things, why you're doing all the right things, but it doesn't seem okay. Your life doesn't seem in balance, or whatever terminology you want to use. So he started off in this chapter relating that to giving to the needy, blowing a trumpet so everybody knows this is what I'm doing. Look at me, I'm charitable. Well, if your goal is to be rewarded by other people acknowledging what a wonderful human being you are, guess what? You've received your reward. You got it. You got it. But what those people give you can't fulfill you. What those people give you doesn't really matter. Case in point, and this is a little bit different than this, but all of the famous and wonderful people in this world are empty and lonely and sad inside. Why? Because they have all the praise of men, but they're still empty. They've got nothing. So when you give to the needy, do it quietly. Do it quietly. Your Lord sees it. That's all that matters. And he doesn't need you to call attention to it. When you pray, don't do it in a way that makes other people think, wow, he's really holy. Wow, he really loves the Lord. Just talk to your Father. Just talk to your Father. That's what he wants. And talk about the important things, which Jesus goes through and lays out for us in the Lord's Prayer. Just pray about the important things. Talk to him. And when you forgive, you're not forgiving for their sake. What you do, do unto the Lord. I forgive others because I am crucified to the world and the world is crucified to me. Jesus died on the cross to forgive those people. Who am I to hold anything against them? I'm viewing it in the perspective of how does this relate to my Lord and the righteousness he gives me and how he gave me that righteousness. So now it moves on to fasting, another religious exercise, very often done for that reason. This is 6:16. See, 12 minutes in, we finally got there. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites. Wow, that's pretty harsh. Like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. How do other people know if you're fasting? How do they know? They only know if you tell them. Unless they're following you around and they know you haven't eaten today, yesterday, this week, this month, whatever, unless you tell them, they won't know. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. You want to be acknowledged by other people for fasting. If that's what you want, the praise of men, it's easy to get. It's easy to get. It's easy to impress people. But when you fast, in contrast to that, complete opposite. When you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. We want the blessings that he gives. And we could talk for some time about fasting and the different ways that it was used, but we're not going to go into that. That can be a little side study if you are so inclined. I just opened this program and it's jumping all over the place with my mouse here. It drives me nuts. Okay, so we move on. Lay up treasures in heaven. Think about the way you think about money. Think about the way you think about wealth, the way you view it, the way you use it, the way you rely on it, okay? And compare it with this and look at what it is that Jesus warns against. And I can't tell what's in other people's hearts. When I do know that when I preach most effectively and I'm laying down the law, so to speak, do you know to whom I'm laying down the law? To me, because I know my own sin. I know my own sinfulness. I know the depravity of my heart. And if I want to understand depravity, if I want to understand sinful rebellion, if I want to understand selfishness and all those ugly things, I don't have to look any farther than my own heart, because that's where it is. I can understand it. And if I understand that, then I've got some insight into the struggles that other people have. You notice how I phrased that. I referred to it as the struggles that other people have, because I don't want to understand my own sin and then be a hypocrite, and Jesus talks about this, and go to fix everybody else like I've got it all figured out. No, we're all broken. We're all weak. We're all weighed down with our own sinfulness. And so we have our struggles, okay? And the scriptures show us clearly that everyone had those struggles. David had those struggles. Saul had those struggles. Solomon had those struggles. On and on and on. Moses, Abraham, we all have struggles because of sin. It makes us weak. We're imperfect. We are flawed. And so we need to heed these warnings because they come from the Lord who understands us. He knows the way we were supposed to be. He knows the way he created us, and he knows what we are now as fallen and yet redeemed sinners, struggling as we all together spend our 15 minutes here in this brief existence crawling toward the lamp of the light of his truth. And it's his word, his truth, that shines on us and shows us these things. It shines on us and we see our own sin. It shines ahead and shows us the way we are to go. So Jesus warns us. And notice here, he's not beating anybody up. He's admonishing. There is concern here because he knows where it goes. No one understands better the deceitfulness of riches than Jesus, and he talks about it all the time. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Treasure. Think of the concept of treasure. When you think of treasure, what do you think of? You think of a chest. When you think of treasure, what do you think of? You think of a cave with Aladdin's lamp, right? That whole myth of Aladdin and the lamp and the genie is about what? It's about the corruptive force of avarice and greed and how appealing it is to us. Like a moth, mentioned here, like a moth is drawn to the light that will destroy it. So we are drawn to these things, the stuff of this world. And if you think about that, what did Adam and Eve choose? They chose this world. They chose to make their own paradise here. It's all deception. It's all a lie. It's all empty. It brought nothing but, well, death. But that is what they chose and what they pursued. But when we think of wealth, treasure, it's something that you store up. It's something to just enjoy because you have it, because you can look at that balance and see how big it is, see how much it is growing. We think that we've got all this stuff, and so we're okay. And there was the parable Jesus tells about the man with the barns, the big barns. He had amazing production from his crops, and so he tore down his barns to build bigger barns. They were filled, and he said, well, I can relax, rest easy, soul, because you're taken care of. And God said to him, you fool, tonight your soul, this very night, your soul is required of you, and what will become of all this stuff? We need to work very hard to look at wealth, material things, as simply tools, God's going to provide for us. We're going to get to that very shortly if I ever get moving here. God's going to provide for us. He doesn't want us to worry about that. He doesn't want us to think that we're laying up treasure for ourselves. Now, does what I'm saying here go completely contrary to everything the world teaches us? Yes. Who rules this world? Who also knows the corruptive, deceitful power of wealth? Yeah, the Lord of hell, who runs this world and all of his minions. Okay, because all of it is garbage. It's all junk. It all disappears. It all goes away. My mother will soon die. and nothing is going in the casket with her that's going on to the next life, like all these other religions teach, where all this wealth goes in a tomb with them. Nothing's going with them. Nothing's going with them. The thing about John Rockefeller, that he died and it took the accountants 100 years, or took them a year to count up all his wealth for tax purposes and all. And somebody asked the head accountant, how much did JD, John David Rockefeller, leave behind? And I always figured that accountant is a Christian, because he said all of it. He left behind all of it. Anyway, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where do you want your heart to be? Where do you want your heart to rest? I want my heart to rest in the one who, if need be, can provide for me miraculously, who can cause blessings to come to me. So my eye, interesting picture here. And it's talking about the same thing: treasure, perception. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. Think of your eye. How does light, how does perception, the way you understand this world, first and foremost, it comes into your being, into your consciousness through your eye. What do we'll talk about, man, I was down the other day at the car lot and I set my eye on this whatever. Or I was wherever at the gun shop for me and I saw this, I set my eye on that. What am I talking about? I want it. I marked it as I got to have that. I want to figure out how I can get it. What do I have to do to achieve that treasure, that thing that I think is going to bring me joy and happiness? So the eye is here. It's a very accurate metaphor for our perception and what we set our heart on, what we look at, what turns our head. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, if I am pursuing and looking at this world in the way the Lord wants me to, if I'm saying, Lord, guide my eye, guide my heart, help me set my heart, my mind, my time, my effort, my energies, my being on the things you want me to. If I do that, then my eye is healthy and my whole body is going to be full of light. Who's the light of the world? Who is that? Jesus. John 8:12, I am the light of the world. What did he say just one chapter ago in Matthew 5:16? You are the light of the world. So if I'm setting my heart, my mind, my eye on the things of God, I'm full of light. But if your eye is bad, if I'm looking at material things, if I'm looking at the things of this world and desiring them, marking them as treasure that I wish to accumulate, your whole body will be full of darkness. Not good. Darkness is never in the scriptures used as a positive thing, ever. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Think of that. If the thing that should bring light is bringing me darkness, if it is darkness, that's really dark. It's really dark. Downward spiral, deception. I'm pursuing things that I think are going to bring me joy, light, happiness. They bring darkness. Darkness is death. So no one can serve two masters. He just gets right down to brass tacks. No one can serve two masters. If you've ever tried to do that in a work setting, if you've had that, and probably all of you have, two masters is a miserable situation. It's impossible. You can't keep them both happy, especially if the two are completely divergent, opposite, polar opposites in what they want and what they desire and what they promise and where it leads. It's like getting pulled in two directions, and eventually you choose one or the other. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other. That's one way to picture it. And when it comes to material things, and we talked about coveting in the commandments in Exodus 20 on Sunday, coveting Coveting is sinfully wanting something, right? If I'm coveting, if I'm sinfully wanting something, who is it who tends to lose in this one or the other? The things of the world or God? I start out being angry with him because he's keeping good things from me. That's where my sinful mind goes, which is core to the lie Satan told in the garden. You will not surely die. God knows there's this good stuff and he's keeping it from you, right? For either he will hate the one and love the other. How do you know what somebody loves? How do you know? Where do they spend their time? On what do they spend their money? That's what they love. That's what they love. Or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. Opposite things, devotion and despising. Can't get more contrary and opposite than that. You cannot serve God and money. You cannot serve God and money. And many of you have heard me talk about Marvin Schwann. I know Aaron and Jen heard Papa talking about Marvin Schwann this past week when we were up there visiting, because Marvin Schwann paid the money to publish my dad's book. But Marvin Schwann was a faithful man. You know what Marvin's big struggle was? How do I serve the Lord with all this? How do I be a good steward with all of this? And he's one of the few who made sure he was struggling with that on the correct side. It's not easy to do. Wealth is often not the blessing that we think it would be. It can be just the opposite. So watch out, take care, take heed. Jesus warns us. He warns us. And we're not going to get into this. Next time we get into do not be anxious. And this is a passage that is good to pretty much commit to memory when Jesus is talking about not worrying, because that's the other extreme, right? I'm treasuring things up. War with, sin is so multifaceted. It's so corruptive. It's so deceitful that it can mess us up on both ends of the seesaw. We're either struggling with loving money and wanting more and more and more, or we're struggling with, I'm worried about how I'm going to pay my bills. I'm fixated on it. It's troubling me. It's keeping me up at night. And Jesus is going to address that. But I don't know if I've ever seen a particular sinful struggle that we have, a struggle with our weaknesses that doesn't come at us from both ends. We get surrounded by it, and anywhere way we turn, we can struggle with it. We can struggle with wealth from the perspective of thinking that I earned it for myself, and I'm just so wonderful and hardworking and industrious and frugal and whatever else, and that can be a sinful attitude. It's really hard when it comes to wealth in this world to keep our heads on straight, and that's why Jesus gives us so many warnings about it. All right, we're going to stop there because a half hour goes awful daggone fast. So thank you to everybody who was watching on YouTube. Hope it was a blessing. Please feel free to share it with others. God